And I play some poker. So when I play poker, the when I go into a hand, and let's say I have an 80% chance of winning a hand, what I have to remember is that 2 out of 10 times I'm going to lose that hand. If you don't understand that, and you're not understanding the risk involved in that hand, right? So if I'm going to go all in, but I'm going to win 8 times, which is a hell of a probability, but 2 times I'm going to lose it, and I have to be okay with that. And so that's also been a real interesting perspective for me to kind of live by, is understanding that all the data, economics is an uncertain science. So everyone can have their prognostications about what's going to happen, but the reality is that we never truly know.
Welcome to Sharpen the Spear podcast, where we help manufacturing executives command the front and win the floor. I'm Richard Walsh, creator of the Sharpened Impact methodology, and I spent decades helping leaders transform frontline teams, unlock hidden profit, and capture capacity they didn't even know they had. If you want to see where your leadership gaps are costing you and how to fix them, head over to grittolead.com and run the free Sharpened Impact Simulator today. Let's sharpen your edge and get started. And we are back on STS Sharpen the Spear podcast with another incredible guest. Richard McWhorter is with us today. And Richard, no one knows Richard as well as Richard. So Richard, backstory, bring us up to speed so we can tear into our conversation.
So started in this business, financial management, back in 1988. I was 18 years old, and I'd been still 17 at the time. And I got a job as an intern. And next thing you know, I became the receptionist. I became a sales assistant. I think they're kind of client associates now. And then in 1992, I got a break, and some advisors went to a new firm. At that time, it was called Payne Weber, and they asked me if I would come along with them and become a financial advisor. And so while I was going to school, and I was studying to become a financial advisor at the same time. So that was back in 1992. And so it's been, 34 years now. And, we have had very grateful for the career that we've had. It's been a wild ride, and dealing with people and primarily family offices, entertainers, musicians, athletes, and we've been in some great situations. And for me, it's been a storied career of a lot of that. And now we're 36 families primarily. We also have an entertainment and music practice with some athletes as well. And we run about $2.1 billion. That's what we do. That's what we've done.
Wow. Yeah, that's really interesting. You know what I love, Richard? Like, there's so many ways to make money and do money. And there's just so much money out there. I was having a conversation with someone the other day. I'm like, I don't think anyone kind of gets the concept of how much is out there.
You know what I find?
Because now today they toss around $1 trillion like it's nothing.
Right. No, for sure. The numbers that we talk about at this point is ridiculous. We were. I was going to say that one of my first clients was a door-to-door egg salesman back in the 50s and the 60s. Door-to-door. At the time, out here, there used to be a restaurant chain called Bob's Big Boy. That was his biggest client. Anyway, so long story short is that the guy with that door-to-door egg salesman, he built a real estate empire in a local city. And at the time of his passing, was worth $30 million or whatever. And you go from somebody that wasn't making a lot of money to being able to save his money, build these pieces of real estate in the area. By the way, it was 2 blocks from where he lived, so it was even easier to manage. But he was able to do those types of things. And I love the stories. We hear about the Bill Gates and the Steve Jobs and Elon Musk and all those guys. for me, it's the stories of all this wealth that has been built in various ways that really gets me going. So I love all that stuff.
Yeah, it's my great grandfather was like that. He lived on the street, kind of like a U, right? So it'd come in one side, down around the other, and out another side.
Mm,
He owned every house on the block eventually. Okay, owned the whole neighborhood.
it's
One at a
crazy.
time, then he'd rent to sell, and then they couldn't live up to their obligation, get the thing back and do all that stuff. But it was just like you said, these things you wouldn't even know.
No,
Like it took me a long time before I even knew that happened.
yeah, we'll never, the unfortunate side is we'll never hear those stories unless we know those stories, right?
Right.
When I was first starting the business, we would sit down and I would go to their house and we would just sit there and talk and I was 21 years old, 22 years old. And here's this 70-year-old man or 75-year-old man. I don't remember exactly how old he was at the time. But he would tell me these wonderful stories about what it was like in the 50s and the 60s and building this real estate and how he had to save his money and the sacrifices he did. And, most people will never hear those stories, unfortunately. Yeah.
Yeah. I remember my parents, we drove by this house. I was young and they go, see that house? It was $4,000 when you guys were born.
Wow.
And we couldn't afford it.
Wow.
Like we could have bought that for $4,000, and now it's like 340,000. It's a little tiny thing, it's nothing, but it's just like, so you hear that stuff. And just to jump back, I used to go to Bob's Big Boy often as a child.
Oh, there you go.
Breakfast we had one. There's a few of those left out there, believe it or not. There are a few.
Yeah, I know that the original in a city called Toluca Lake is still open, and it still has the drive-through. So during COVID, we would go to the drive-through because you couldn't go inside the restaurant,
Right.
But they were serving outside. So
awesome, yeah. But I actually remember that one. We used to go there often. that was something, but very cool. So as you grew this, so you begin this is 92. You're kind of doing this thing, and what gave you the real kind of, what was the catalyst that made you want to do this and persist to it to this day?
It's funny you say that. Listen, in college or at high school, college, I was a horrible student. Hated to learn. I not hated to learn, but hated to put in the work to learn. And then in 1992, when I got my break, you all of a sudden have to start. They back then they gave you a cubicle, they gave you a phone book, and hopefully we'll see you here in a year. And they gave you a little bit of salary at the time. So but I'm a very competitive person and just naturally. And so there was other people in the cubicles with me and no one wanted to lose, right? No one wanted to be the failure out of the group of us. Right. So we just worked. It was always the adage at that time is that you have to be the first one in and the last one to leave. So I remember we would, back then we would have, there was 8 of us or 9 of us at the time. And, we would do everything to be the first one in the morning. So 5:30, 5:45, and whether or not we were being productive, that's a whole nother story. But the reality is that you just wanted to be the first one in and the last one to leave every single day. And you just worked your butt off. For me, the first 10 years were 16, 17-hour days. It was insane. So for me, it was just that sense of I just don't want to fail, right? And you didn't want to be that guy. So that's what drove me originally, was having those other guys around me and wanting to be the success out of all of us. So that was the original. And then I remember in 1999, I kind of wanted to get out of the business. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of time. There's not a lot, you're not making a lot of money and you're making minimum wage maybe at the time. And that's 10 years in. I went and I remember I sat down with this gentleman that was a assistant manager at the firm I was at, which was Smith Barney at the time. And he just said, give it a little bit more time. And I said, okay. What I did at that time was that I started to learn. I became extremely curious about how the mechanism works. Bonds, stocks, never really got into options, but bonds and stocks primarily. And I spent so much time on just learning reading prospectuses of municipal bonds. By the way, there's nothing more boring than that. And when you're a single guy and having these conversations at bars with women or whatever, I was the most boring human being alive. So I just started to read, and to this day, that's propelled everything to what it is now. There's a confidence with that, right? There's a confidence with learning and understanding. And we hear so much rhetoric on, I don't care what side you come from politically, but you come, on either side of that debate. And I listen to it. And the problem is that, I'm a data guy, right? So all I look at is the data behind this stuff. And when you look at the data, it either confirms or does not. But it gives you clarity. And so having that confidence, having that ability. The other part is that, and what I've learned over the last 30 years is that, as much research, as much reading, as much data as I go through, the reality at the end of the day is it's a higher probability of being correct. Doesn't mean it's going to be correct, right? And I play some poker. So when I play poker, when I go into a hand, and let's say I have an 80% chance of winning a hand, what I have to remember is that 2 out of 10 times I'm going to lose that hand. If you don't understand that, then you're not understanding the risk involved in that hand, right? So if I'm going to go all in, but I'm going to win 8 times, which is a hell of a probability, but 2 times I'm going to lose it, and I have to be okay with that. And so that's also been a real interesting perspective for me to kind of live by, is understanding that all the data, economics is an uncertain science. So everyone can have their prognostications about what's going to happen, but the reality is that we never truly know.
Yeah, I think that's a good philosophy to have and understand. I've done enough stuff too. I've been 35 years, in business, all this stuff, and I've got the best plans of anybody,
right, until
I implement them.
Right, right.
And then stuff just happens. No battle plan ever survives the first shot.
Yeah,
that's just how it is. So it's constant pivot. It's do this, do that, adjust, fail a little bit, keep going. My whole thing, Richard, is it's the quitting part that I'm not good with.
Right.
Like the guy told you just keep going, that wasn't a lot to chew on. Just keep going a little longer. That's a lot of self-motivation on your part.
Well, and I appreciate that, but I do think though that, at the end of the day, we can, a lot of, it's very easy. It's much easier to give up, right? I mean, it's just, it didn't work. I wasn't good at it, whatever it may be. Or can I truly understand how to get better, which I'm always trying to get better. And then secondarily to that is, am I going to stay curious enough through this process to enjoy it? Right. And, listen, I find the most self-abusive sports, golf, poker, anything that is just, it is true self-abuse. Where, golf is the only sport that I know that you can play and actually get worse at, practice at. So my point is that, but I'm so determined to get better. I'm so, when I put my head into something, it's not like I can go and just kind of do it one off. I'm the kind of guy that goes, all right, I'm going to start playing golf. Well, I'm going to start hitting balls 6 days a week. And that's how I do things. Now, with economics, I have found a love of reading about economics. And I get so excited when the new unemployment figure comes out and I can run the data and see where jobs are being created and where they're not, and what the wages look like and the hourly work week. All that stuff gets me going. And so I found this true love of that, the learning process of it all. So yeah, that's who I am as a human being.
Well, and that's it. I was on kind of a similar track as you. Like school, I hated it.
Yeah.
Okay, just waiting to get out. Never missed a day. Okay, but I didn't do anything. Okay, my friends, I always share this with people. I go, I hung out with the smartest kids in school, the 4.0 plus kids, right, who checked their grade point average every day. Okay, every day was their thing. So my senior year, I went to it was like my third high school or something, but I had this really good group of friends, all the smartest kids. And my friend Vic's like, let's go check our GPAs. I'm like, okay, I'll go with you. So he gets his 4.2 or whatever he's got. He tells her to grab mine and she goes, okay, here's Richard, 1.7, and he's like, well, that's not his. You pulled the wrong one. And I'm
Right.
like, Victor, dude, that's mine. And he's like, there's no way.
Right.
I go, listen, tell me how many times you've seen me take a book home. Okay. Like I don't do that stuff, And he's like, yeah, but you're not. I go, you mean I'm not dumb? I know I'm not dumb. Okay. I just don't like school.
And you don't
So
want to do the
after I
work.
got out,
Yeah.
that's when I began to learn. When the Marine Corps, and we're learning stuff, doing things. I mean, I could do basics, but I gained a love for learning.
Right.
I started to read even more. I like to read already, but I really started reading books. I go, I can teach myself the stuff.
Right.
Like I got to go back because there's things I didn't know. And I started learning that. And that kind of became my thing. And then I got into business coming out of the Corps. Now I got to learn all about business because there's no teaching on that, so started doing different things. So yeah, I'm like you just keep going. You have some failures, different startups, but you just keep going.
No, and it's a valid point. I mean, listen, it just depends on if you're willing to put in the work. I find that a lot of the advisors that I know, I've been doing this a long time. Beverly Hills is a small area, and so I know a lot of these guys. And but a lot of these guys, they don't want to put in the work. They kind of they're good salespeople, but they don't. I remember I was at a meeting one time and this guy was talking about the economy. It's a family office meeting, so maybe 15 people at the table. And he's talking to everybody about the economy. And we work for a sister company, so I knew that what he was talking about was the CIO of the company's research. So at the end of his speech, I said, why do you think that's going to happen? And he had no answer. Right? Because all he's doing is consuming the information that was being shown to him, but he's not going one depth lower one depth below that to go into the actual reasoning, right? The one thing that I've tried to tell people, especially over the last, it just seems like there's been more disagreement over the last 12 years, let's say, right? I'm trying to be as politically correct as possible. So, but you look at when I hear about what somebody wants to do in the administration, I don't care which administration, what they want to do. My job is not to argue the policy. My job is not to, because the policy is going to be implemented whether I like it or not. It is what it is. But my job is to understand the ramifications of that policy. So for me, the study becomes, okay, you're going to implement this. How is that going to be impactful on stocks, bonds, the economy, whatever it may be, so that I can then guide my clients in that way. And that's what's always fascinating to me is understanding the positives of the policy and the negatives of the policy and understanding both sides of that.
That's really good, Richard. You just made me think of this. If you have a very strong understanding of the repercussions, okay, what's going to happen, and you're guiding clients, all of a sudden you have an advantage.
For sure.
Because this is going to go in the crapper. So we're going to get out of here. We're going to go over here and we'll ride this out to the day. You know what I mean? So that's almost like a superpower,
Well, but the thing I will tell you is that once again, it's like a poker hand, right? It's probabilities of being correct on either side of that debate, because things can happen theoretically that will, in spite of all the ramifications, still do well or still do poorly. So it might be the greatest policy in the world and it still doesn't do well. Right? Because of outside forces that we can't quantify or judge. So, there's tail risk to everything, right? I can look at pretty much the 90% probability, but what about those 5% on either side of that? That's where it starts to become interesting, because those are things that we cannot see, and there's so many moving forces. You got to remember that when you're dealing with the economy has thousands of forces every single day. And if we're trying to understand consumer behavior, let's say, who knows? Right? One day they're going to McDonald's, the next day they're going to Burger King for whatever reason, right?
That is a job I don't want.
Right.
Trying to understand consumer behavior.
It's impossible, right? So, it's funny. I have 6 kids, and so when Richard,
we love it. We love torture.
so when I look at my kids and I look at how they're consuming, for example, media today, we're looking at, my kids don't watch sports, UFC, they do, so I guess so, but traditional sports, right? Baseball, basketball, they don't watch any of that stuff. They might watch the highlights if they're interested for whatever reason in a game on YouTube, where they just show the scoring plays. They watch YouTube primarily, and then TikTok, right? My kids. So I look at that, and I look at the changing behaviors, right? It's completely different than me. Like if I tell them I'm on Facebook, they go, yeah, that's for people your age. Yeah. Right. But if you talk to them about Instagram Reels, or if you talk to them about TikTok, right, things I don't understand, that's where they're spending 90% of their time. So my question is that, then if you look at something like that, what happens to Netflix? What happens to HBO Max? What happens to Paramount Plus, right? Are those going to have the same audiences going forward, that they're going to be able to garner these kids from YouTube and TikTok, which they've grown up on, to their platforms over time? And I'm not making any recommendations, whatsoever. All I'm saying is that that's how, for me, that's how I start to look at things. And then we start looking at, our subscribers increasing or decreasing? Are they going into new markets? We can do all that kind of research. But the primary way that we look at things is what's going on in today's world. What are people talking about? And then exploring those different situations.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because it is these mediums, where these conversations are going. And what's really interesting, just to take it down another level, or up a level, deeper, we're going down. You confused me.
I had the same thing with below. And
So, but depending on the medium, the discussion is going to be completely different.
Right.
Because you might have, 14 to 18-year-olds. Right. You might have 20 to 28-year-olds, that kind of stuff. And there's going to be a different world experience, life experience, everything else, different priorities and all that stuff. So you kind of have to go get all that data and then bring it together and what's rising to the top.
That's right.
Where does this go? Because we all listen. I think my office manager signed me up for Facebook in 2008. Right. I never would have done it voluntarily. Okay. So like that and LinkedIn and all this stuff, back then. So she said I had to. At the same time, I was learning how to send an email. So right. So, but I'm like, well, what's this? And then it was like the cool thing. It was MySpace and it was Facebook. Then that became not the cool thing. Now it's a bunch of grandfathers. Grandmothers looking at their kids and whatever, so it just, you see the shifts in all this, because all this, whatever, all these things started rising up as competition, and it's fascinating to watch, so I don't do a lot on it still. Okay. I have certain things where I know where my clients are. I'm only client focused, right? Because it's not that I'm not a social person, Richard. I'm just not a social person. I mean, I like people, but I'm not out chatting and scrolling. I don't have any time for that. Removed it all from my phone and stuff, just because it's just a nuisance. Okay. It's no value coming into me, on any of them. So I just stay off them. But I really love the kind of the concept of looking at these different discussion points, from a data gathering standpoint. My new venture is very data heavy, right? It really relies on that kind of stuff coming back from users and things like that. And I'm like you, I love it. And I understand the power of data.
For sure.
It's the new oil, as they say, right? There's just so much to it. And here's what I learned is I'm using it in a completely different way. Do you know what I mean? Like data is not just singular, right? You have these applications of data, whether it's economics, it could be the way people are thinking, moving in a certain industry. right? There's data for that, and you can prepare to teach and grow and make a difference in those things by looking at the right data. So I've grown a great appreciation for data.
No. I think listen, data is not perfect. There's no doubt. No one can tell me that data is perfect. If you look at going back to the unemployment figures, if you look at the number of households that they survey and then they become statistically significant at some point, they're not going to all 327 or 340 million people, whatever that number is today. They're not going to every single person and going, how many people are unemployed and how many people are working and in what jobs are you working? They're doing a certain sample size and then that becomes statistically significant. And then they're extrapolating that across all 327, let's just say 327 million people.
Which is crazy because you can't go to a densely populated urban area and compare it to where I live, where I have one neighbor a half mile one way and a half mile the other way.
Well, yeah. I mean, you can't.
I mean, so right? You don't know where this data is coming from,
right?
And they're basing it on that. Like, well, that's two different worlds.
Well, it's like inflation, right? I mean, people will say this is what the inflation rate. Your inflation and my inflation are two different things.
Well, I have a simple way to gauge inflation.
Okay.
If you're going to appreciate this. So you know what the Dollar Tree is, that store?
Sure.
Everything's $1. Okay. Yeah. When they made everything $1.25, like
25%.
It's 25%.
That's right.
Okay. When a store for decades has been $1 and then it has to raise its prices,
right?
Okay, that's not a small thing.
Right.
Okay. That's 25% inflation.
Right.
That's all I got to tell people.
No,
I said the only thing that's inflation proof. Okay, you ready? I figured it out.
All right.
It's the shopping cart at Aldi's. You still put a quarter in to get your shopping cart. Been doing that for 40 years, right? When I was a kid, same quarter, okay? That's the only thing that has beat inflation.
It's the best deal in town.
And they're probably the same shopping carts from 40 years ago,
right.
Okay? Because people actually return them to get that stupid quarterback, So that's all. That's my. By the way,
they made a fortune on that system. If you own the shopping carts at Aldi's for 25 cents for 40 years, you made a fortune with the same shopping carts.
I'm telling you, it's genius. I love their model.
Right.
I'm a huge fan. My wife can write the shopping list, per kid. Like there's four aisles, right? She knows what's in everything. So when I come in, she starts the list there. I never have to double back because I'm mission oriented, right? I don't shop. I just get exactly what's on the list and I'm out.
You still have the marine in you.
Yes, I'm not tempted by anything. The faster I can get out of here, the better. That's why it's my favorite store.
I have a son that's my oldest son's a Marine, and so I do appreciate that. Oh, is that right? I love that.
He's an MSG, man. He's guarding the embassy out there. Coming back in April.
Yeah, mine was guarding the embassy in Ankara and Ghana.
And he was an MSG guy too.
Yeah.
Dang! Look at six kids. Both of those are Marines. They're both MSG.
Richards.
Now the chance they're both MSG. There's some data mess right there, man.
That's pretty good.
That was the third hardest school in the Marine Corps.
Is that right?
Who knew? I was a Marine. Okay, so I was in, and that was like a cool gig to get. Never was going to get. I was a Stinger gunner, but yeah, wild. I mean, it's wild. He just got Marine of the Quarter for the whole region, and now he's up for the global.
Oh, that's awesome.
Really cool.
Good for him.
So, enough.
But I think listen. I think that we spend so much time. It's so funny nowadays. There's so many arguments. There's so much dislocation between what you think and what I think, and I don't mean you and I, but in general. And I think data for me just bypasses a lot of it. Right? Understanding it's not perfect, but it bypasses so much if you can just get down to, take any policy, right? Now, Biden, Trump first time, Obama, I don't care who it is. Take any policy. And when you start to understand what they're saying in the media, what they're saying on social media, what they're saying at the administrations, what they're saying at the state levels, all of that stuff, you take all that stuff and it just clarifies so much, not all, but clarifies so much of it by just spending. And by the way, all these numbers are available to everybody. Mm-hmm. So now I geek out on it and I appreciate that. But a lot of people, if you really wanted to understand something, just the data is available. I'm not doing anything special or have some special database that I go to, right? So I find that really fascinating that if you really want to understand the argument, why wouldn't you spend the time to do that before you really created such a strong, definitive opinion?
Because people love emotion.
That's true. That's true. That's true. That's a good point.
Sucked into that data stuff. That's too black and white. What's interesting is, again, I was talking about what I'm doing, but we collect data on a floor, say a manufacturing floor, right?
Okay.
And I'm able to go on there, collect this data of what's actually happening on the floor, the reality of it, and then go from there and walk into a boardroom and give them the exact, this is what you think is happening. Here's my anchor stuff. Here's what's really happening. And here, by closing these gaps even by 10%, here's your ROI.
Right.
So I can aggregate all this stuff. It's really, it's data. And
so
they can't really argue. I mean, this is your floor today.
Right. Listen, I see businesses, people bring me businesses all the time. Either a family office owns a business or someone brings a deal for them to get involved in or whatever it may be. And all I got to tell you is that when I get through the numbers and all the variables that they put in there to prove their point, you kind of go 99% of the time, you're kind of like, right? Because what happens is that there's, listen, no one goes into a business or has this idea that they've been thinking about and vetted amongst their friends or their colleagues or whatever and go, this is going to be a failure someday. Right. Not a human being alive, right? That wouldn't make any sense. So unless you need a loss. So, but ultimately that's how I see things, right? So people are always coming with this is going to be awesome and this is going to make us a ton of money. And I do appreciate that so much, that they have that want, that entrepreneurial want to make this thing happen. But when you get just to the data of it, tell me the story, tell me the industry, tell me whatever. But when I get to the data, it clarifies the whole thing. And 99% of the time, I'm like, I'm not really interested. So.
Yeah, I'm with you. I've done a lot of that, right? So really looking at stuff, and you have to be what you have to take an engineer's mentality. You know what the problem with an engineer is? They're always finding everything that's wrong.
Yeah.
Okay. Who's going to die?
Right.
Who's going to die because but you have to, right? They have to look at things. I mean, it's structural soundness, right? How long is this thing? What's the motion? What's movement? All the stuff, all the calculations they have to do, but they can tend to be on the negative side. So
that's an economist. Right? If you listen to economists, they're always talking about the economy is going to be crap or whatever it may be. The fact of the matter is that when you look at the downside, when I look at the downside on something and understand that downside, and I'm still okay with that downside, the upside, if it happens, everyone's happy. Not everyone, a lot of people look at the potential. I spend more time on the downside understanding the risk than if it does 10% or 15% or 50% or 100%. Great. But if I understand what my risk is, if I can quantify my risk, then it's much more powerful than understanding if it does 20, 25, 30, 100%, whatever that number is. So, in financial advisement, when I first got into this, there was an old adage that basically said that, if you have $1 and it goes to 50 cents, you've lost 50%. But to go from 50 cents back to $1, you have to make 100%. Right. So people in 2008, 2009, when the markets are down 37% or whatever, to get back to even, you have to make 73%. Right. So even if you're giving up a little bit of the upside, but having much more stable growth, I would take that over wild swings. Right. So I always tell my clients, I'm a singles and doubles hitter all day long. I'm Pete Rose, Rod Carew back in my day. Right. So, those guys that just keep hitting singles, if I hit a home run, it is an absolute accident. Right. So the type of people that we work with are the type of people that are looking for those singles and doubles. A guy a long time ago told me, he said, don't come into my office and tell me you're going to make me rich. I am rich. Just don't mess it up. Wasn't quite that terms he used, but you get my point. So these are all little pieces of experience that have created who I am today, right? These little tidbits of information that you're getting from all these different clients on how they were successful. clients that we deal with, we deal with people in this our biggest clients are $7 and $8 billion. But most of the clients are in the 50 to $100 million range in total net worth. So, except for the athletes and the musicians and stuff. But those guys are, when I learned from those guys how they did things, right? They've been doing it for 30, 40, 50 years. For someone like me, they are the best mentors ever, right? Much better than school, much better than anything else. But that experience that I've received from these wonderful people that have built these wonderful, wonderful, could be multi-generational legacies. That's really where my education comes from.
Yeah, there's no substitute for that at all. I think, remember, since you were doing this back, remember 99, 98, 99, 2000. Sure. So I had a good friend, really good stock guy, really good stockbroker, and stuff. So we're in the steam room one day at the gym, at the club downtown in Chicago. And he's talking to everyone's like, man, these guys they're all telling me, man, this guy's getting 50% return on this and this. They're doing all this internet stuff, right? He's like, I can't. I average 15 to 20% for years for my clients, which is amazing.
That's amazing.
And he goes, and I can't advise this because they're basing it on nothing.
Right.
This money, he's just like, but he's like, kind of feeling like he's getting crushed. These other guys are all throwing around these numbers until when, right? 2000. Good night. Okay. Everything's, the bubble is busted and everything goes. And I'm like, his name was Mark. I go, Mark, aren't you glad you hung in there, man? Because his people are all good to go because they did listen to him. He had to work at keeping them from like jumping ship. That was super tempting back then, right?
No, and what's interesting is that there's a guy named Jeremy Grantham, he's at a company called GMO. So Grantham would say that you could be right one day, but it's your career risk that's in the interim period that you could lose, right? And so he could be right in his whole thinking that might be 2 or 3 years out. So I'll give you a quick story about 99. I had a friend who I was an intern with at Dean Witter Reynolds when I first started. And he went off to corporate development at Amazon, and he had a storied career. When he was at Amazon, though, I met him up in San Francisco for dinner. He was getting married and wanted me to meet his wife. And we were sitting there talking, and he values companies for a living. This is 1998. And I go, dude, how do you even value companies today? He goes, there's not a method that works. And it scared me to death for my clients. Right. So I came back and we started moving more money into fixed income at that time, because here's a guy that's in the middle of it, in the middle of the internet, Amazon. And he was not able to find how to value companies with any type of historical method. Right. So I got very fortunate. Now, remember, I started doing that in 1998. 1999 was a huge year. Part of 2000 was a huge year. And then 2000 hits. And from 2000 to 2002, you look like a legend, right? But I have to remember that I was a year and a half too early on that, right? And the same thing happened in 2006. I just looked at all these friends of mine. I still hang out with 8 guys I've known since I was in kindergarten. And so I know how much they make. We talk, we've known each other for 100 years now. And they're going on vacations and building homes, and they're doing all this stuff. And I'm asking them how. Because at that time, I thought I was making a pretty good living, and these guys are living like they're kings. And they're like, yeah, we're borrowing 110% on our home, and we're doing this, and we're doing that, and we have all this credit. And I got petrified. I just got petrified by the whole thing, and it didn't make sense to me. So in 2006, 2 years too early, we started moving more money into fixed income, and we're at the highest level of fixed income at that time. Not because I knew 2008 was going to happen. It just didn't make sense how 2006 was happening at that time. So we have to be very cognizant. COVID was impossible to predict from my perspective. But the rest of these things, we start to see, when you lived in Chicago, correct?
Yep.
Okay. When you lived in Chicago, I remember they sold their parking lot meters to Goldman Sachs.
Yes, totally got ripped off.
And Goldman Sachs has made a fortune off of them. But they were in financial distress, right? Financial distress at the time. Detroit, Michigan was in distress for many, 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 many years prior to that actually happening. We had so many signs that that was going to happen or potentially going to happen. So when you're looking, when you're open, when you're aware and you're hearing these things, you're like, oh, red flag, right? And it's getting more, and there's more smoke, and there's more smoke, and now you're like in a brush fire, and you're like, but if you're not paying attention and you're not curious enough to try and understand what's going on, and look at the financials of Chicago, look at the financials of Detroit, right? Look at these financials and go, uh-oh, there's problems happening over here. Then all of a sudden you're surprised that things happen, you know? Or Orange County, when they went bankrupt, I think back in 90, don't quote me on this, but 93, 94, 95, somewhere in there. When they went bust, that was a complete surprise because that was just accounting fraud, or investment fraud. But my point is that so many situations that we deal in that are completely visible years prior to it actually happening. We just have to be open to that. So anyway.
Yeah, very, very true. And it just people aren't, because they're lazy.
Yes.
They're unaware. Okay, I'll give them the ignorance card. But most people, they're really not watching what's going on.
Right.
And you can see it. And it's one of the things I enjoy about being in business, and working with other businesses. That's the thermostat of the economy.
Right.
I see what orders are coming. I see when things are dipping, because then we have to adjust.
Right.
Hey, there's a 15% dip or 20% dip in orders. What's going on? How do we make up for that? We can't fix it. We can't make people order more, but we could find other avenues to create income in the same business to help balance that out. And that's what we do. We take that approach because you can't just go correct a dip in sales. Unless it's your company doing something wrong.
Right. But you also have to be nimble, right? I mean, I always look back at, like, what if Blockbuster had bought a piece, not all, but a piece of Netflix back in the day?
Instead of laughing at them.
Right. Just a piece, right? But to think, once again, to think that or anyone knows which way things are going, or not taking into consideration the potential of these things happening, is ridiculous to me. Right. So we have to, I can look at all this AI stuff that's going on today and trillions of dollars, and how are they going to make money on that money? And just like the internet days, companies are going to survive. The question is which companies, right? So we have to be nimble enough to go, okay, Palantir, NVIDIA, right, all these kinds of companies. Oh, wait, there's Anthropic over here that's coming up. And then you have ChatGPT that was doing so well. And then Google comes out with Gemini and then beats up on ChatGPT. So you know what I mean? Someone's going to come out of this the winner. The question is who, and you've got to be able to be aware and nimble enough to kind of go with how that's going to play itself out, because we don't know. We just don't know.
Yeah, super powerful. You've got to. You have to be awake. You got to see what's going on. When there's trends, then there's movers. And then when it gets to be that kind of, like you just described, it, chat and Grok and Gemini and AI, and I want to put them on satellites because the energy that's involved. And now you got the whole energy sector ramping up. I have a place here. They went from, they do 3 megawatt generators in the house and all this stuff, right? That's a lot of power in one place, 4,000 gallon diesel tanks underneath them. You know what I mean? So there's like 50 of them in front of the building. I go, I got to go in there. I go, what is going on? I just go talk to one of the shift leads. He goes, like the world ended, no one told us. Right. These backup generators. I'm like, something's happening. This is a big we call Power Solutions International. And he goes, no, man, AI. Right. This is all Power AI. I go, oh man, it makes total sense. Like he goes, we went from 20 orders a month to 60 overnight. Another guy who does this literally makes the switch for that power, the switch from the generator to the regular. He was $100 million a year company, went to 300 overnight, 300 million, just making the switch, like insanity, right? So you just see these massive influxes. I'm like, so I look at it this way, Rich. I'm going, okay, you went from 100 to 300. That's amazing, but is that sustainable?
Right.
You've had to gear up to do that. When that slows down, then what? Where are you at?
Right.
Right? When there's no longer
Or if
demand.
it slows down at all, right? I mean, maybe it doesn't slow down. Maybe we're going to need more power than we assume today, right?
Well, I think that's more the case.
Well, maybe, Richard, but what happens if technology becomes more efficient and we need less water? Because you got to remember, the thing that's always fascinating to me about this stuff is like, for example, I drive an electric car, okay? So everyone's like, oh, you're green and you're this and you're that. The reality is that I just like the car. I don't know anything about cars, but I like this car. So my point is that if you look at what runs my car by plugging in at home is what? Electricity. And then if you know what runs electricity plants, you know you need coal, oil, and natural gas. That's how I look at it. Then, so when you start to take steps back on how we can look at AI, and everyone wants to hear the sexy names, the Palantirs and the NVIDIAs and all that stuff of the world. For me, I'm more interested in the nuts and bolts of it all. What drives all this stuff? We can look at utility. We can look at natural gas. We can look at oil. We can look at even coal now, right? Again. And then you take it back to the raw materials that are necessary, the lithium. And you go through each one of these processes and you kind of play these situations out. It's really interesting to see what's down there, right? This is cool because you see it every day and everyone's talking about it on news and social media. But this is necessary. Now, the question is, just on that last point, the question is that we look at what the expectations are for AI in the future. We look at what the expectations are for what we're going to need of oil and natural gas and coal and raw materials and all this stuff. But what if technology comes along? Because we're looking at what it is today. What if technology comes along that actually doesn't need as much or finds another way to generate that, right? Or to your point is that do we put data centers in space and we don't need coolant, so we don't need as much water, right? But then what does it take to get the data? I think the last thing I read was that it was going to be 4 miles by 2 miles is kind of the size of the data center that they were talking about. So how many trips do I have to make? How much is that going to cost? How long is it going to take me to build this? When will we be ready? And the big one is that will the chips be able to sustain in the sky without water and not burn out? And if they do burn out, what do you have to do to replace those?
That's it. Yeah.
Right. So you go through all these questions behind it. That's my point.
And I'm like you. I enjoy overthinking.
I love it.
I love going down. I keep going. I'm a big fan of the Socratic argument for that reason, right? Just keep going and going and going. It's really great, but it gives you great revelation. You start to see a lot of things, and again, people, and you described it right, Richard. People are seeing the thing that's out front, the electric car. They're not extrapolating backwards. Right. You got to go back and like, okay, what is all this about? I was thinking, I remember when they started, I'm like, okay, great. Well, they're not really hitting the road tax. Okay, well, they're hitting them on the licensing when you get it. They got it. Now you're spending $3,000 on a license plate, whatever. I said, well, it's cheap, as far as plugging in until everyone's plugging in.
Right.
Okay, then electric's not cheap anymore. So all of a sudden we're all going to be paying for that. So I go, the old Uncle Sam's always going to get a piece of the action. Okay.
And listen, they're gonna find a way to it's either going to be utility, and then behind utilities, once again, is going to be oil. So are you reducing the amount at the pump, but invisibly you're actually increasing the amount of oil that we need to run the electricity plants to then run the cars?
Well, I think the wind turbines, just for one last example.
Yeah.
So I remember, T. Boone Pickens, right?
Sure.
Just oil and gas.
Yeah.
He's putting all the wind stuff up and everyone's, oh, see, he gets it. All this stuff. I go, yeah, he gets it. You need gas at every one of those.
Right.
Put in the pipelines for all. The guy's a genius. Okay. He's using this thing that's barely usable. Okay, but you're laying the infrastructure for all his gas lines and everything else. I thought it was pretty genius.
No, and listen, that's the interesting thing. So if you take it on face level, a lot of the things, if you take it on face level, you're like, okay. But if you go behind it, if you just take one step, and to your point earlier is that, ignorance or laziness or whatever the reason is, right? What's funny is I say this to my kids all the time. I'm like, when I look at a book and it's 900 pages, you're like, oh, I don't want to do that, right? But what if you looked at it and just said, if I read 10 pages a day, I know I'll be done in 90 days, right? So it's this incremental process. It's not all at once. It's not a data dump. It's kind of the overnight success story, right? It's very few people are overnight successes. It's years and years and years, and all of a sudden it becomes a success. So my point is that incremental knowledge is much more important to me than just trying to throw myself into something and learn everything that I know today. Because also the information's always changing as we get more data or more information about it. So that's what I always try and stress to my clients is that we are trying to pick up as much of the information as we possibly can. I'm only one, and my assistants and everybody, that's fine, but we can only consume a certain amount of information. Now AI has made that easier, but I do think that if you just incrementally start to learn some of this stuff, you're going to know so much more in just 30 days than you know today. So,
and I think one thing I just trained myself, I don't know why, since I was young, I see something, and whatever the price is or whatever the thing, I look and I go, well, how can it only be that?
all right.
Okay, how do they? So I'd always start down that trail. Where does this come from? What is it? How are they doing that? I always see things, and when it's that too good to be true thing, you're like, how are they offering this? And solar is one of those things.
Right.
As you're looking at these people's houses, residential solar, I'm like, so as I talk to people, I owned a roofing company. Okay, so I kind of know about that, and I'm talking to every customer who may have solar. Oh, give me the scoop. Well, they got the $7,000 rebate. They got the $10,000 rebate. They got the and I asked them, would you have bought it without the rebate? Oh, absolutely not. Okay, so I'm going, let's see. So this is this, and that's all going to wear out, and it's going to be, no one would have bought this if they didn't get someone else's money.
Right.
Okay, so I'm just like, this is not a thing for me. I'm not into it for that. And I get it, you know what I mean? But it's not economical. There's no ROI on it. Unless someone's subsidizing it,
or there's service contracts, right? The big thing is we have solar, and those service contracts and that never ends, right? You have solar, you have a service contract for the next 50 years.
Yep.
So that monthly payment keeps coming in like clockwork. So
yeah, it's just it's fascinating, but it really the whole point of this is just that the mindset. How you look at this stuff, I think that's the big takeaway here. You've really got to, from a data standpoint, and you've got to kind of, the old saying, follow the money.
Yeah.
Okay. Where's all this coming from? How do you get to this? You're only seeing an end product. So you need just a little bit of curiosity to go, how'd that happen?
Well, listen, I think when we look at these, what they call circular deals in the system right now, right? Oracle buys from Palantir, Palantir buys from Oracle or ChatGPT or whatever ubiquitous platform. So there's trillions of dollars of these circular deals. The question is going to be, by the way, I don't know if anyone I know no one has the answer to this. How are we going to make a return on our investment from those $2 or $3 trillion that we're taking into consideration today, right? Or borrowing, or however they're doing it. And how long is it going to take for me to start seeing a rate of return on that money from something practical that comes from AI that's going to change that? Right. So, that's where I see, that's where it's going to be fascinating to follow the progress of AI through this process. Right? How are we going to make that rate of return on that 3 trillion or 2 trillion, whatever that number is today?
Yeah, I think that comes down to, I'll put it under the unintended consequence, which aren't always bad. Okay. They just weren't expecting that. But like you said, something's going to get innovated using that tool, which I have actually done. Okay. I've been using those tools like it's going to give me an incredible ROI. I don't care about them. Okay,
right.
I'm gonna get one because I've used the tool to do something no one else has done yet. Okay, so but it is that something's gonna pop, like you're saying. Someone's gonna take something, and because of this, they're able to do this and this, and it may not be related whatsoever, right? But now this is it's killing it, right? It's awesome. It's out there just slaying the market, and so it's fascinating to watch.
No, listen, I am constantly amazed listen, I live in Los Angeles, so I am constantly amazed about home prices out here. I am constantly amazed about, I used to work with a basketball team, and you look at the valuation on a basketball team.
Yeah.
Boston Celtics went for $6 billion.
Yeah.
If you look at their viewership, it's growing at about 3%, I think is what I figured out, 3% a year, maybe a little bit more, a little bit less, but $6 billion. How are homes in Los Angeles County $1 million? And I don't know if that's true, 700 to $1.25 million, depending on the area, average home price. Where's that? I don't understand where that money comes from to do something like that. So listen, I'm amazed by a lot of these things. I'm amazed by, the income levels of most of the majority and how this thing just continues to go higher, and the markets keep going higher, and it's great because it's all new wealth on paper, and it's not real until we sell that stuff. But it is fascinating to me to see how many people are buying homes. I know here in Beverly Hills, $2.5, $3, $4, $5 million. How many people have that kind of money for a home?
Yeah,
right?
Shocking.
It's shocking to me. So all these things are going to be fascinating to see how they work themselves out. Whether there's a pop, right? Whether this has just become the new norm and this is just the way it is, and wages are going to have to continue to go higher somehow, or I don't know that. But that's why we take it for what it is today. I can see that. But what it's like a year from now, 6 months from now, 5 years from now, that's the more fascinating part of this whole thing.
Yeah, and you talk about the basketball team of $6 billion. That's a valuation. Like, it's hard to understand how they got that valuation, but it's a personality-driven business.
Sure.
I mean, you're banking on personalities.
Right.
Like, it's crazy. You do all the sports stuff, but like you think about it, it's the team, it's the players. It's a coach. It's personality driven. Yeah, they got a cool stadium. Maybe they got some marketing or whatever, but really it comes down to who's playing on the field.
But that's at the moment, right? So am I paying?
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. And then it changes 3 years from now when I trade somebody away, right? Or they retire or whatever it may be, right? So the media rights, the local media rights, is a big deal for these teams. The local media rights, right? You have the national contract and then you have local. Local is interesting. The question I have, right, going back to something we were talking about earlier, is my kids don't watch sports on CBS or NBC or Time Warner or any of these companies. They just don't. So I don't know, and I got to do more research on this, but I don't know what kind of viewership there is, either increasing, decreasing, or stagnating on sports in general. Now, whether they're going into new markets, that's another situation, but that's not local, that's national. But some of these deals, you look at some of these local media rights deals for perspective, and you're talking about $500 million over 10 years that, let's say, an ESPN pays for a team, whatever team you want to put in there. That's some of the value, right? So if you buy a team, I'm going to get $50 million a year for the next 10, and it's backed up by ESPN, let's say, just for example. There is a value to that number, right? And what that means today. But to spend $6 billion, you're assuming either, I can't see how that pencils out for a positive rate of return unless you continue to increase ticket prices and people keep doing that. You increase merch prices and people keep doing that because salaries don't seem to be going down. So then you have the other side of that, which is the media rights. And the media rights are really where I think the value is. But if kids are not watching those on television, the next demographic, which is a large piece of our population, may not consume that in the same way, right? And so what happens to the salaries of players? What happens to the value of a team? And to your point, I think, is that if you have a team today that won, like the Seattle Seahawks, right? The Seattle Seahawks won the Super Bowl, they're up for sale. Now, that was part of the trust upon Mr. Allen's passing and all that stuff. But my point is that they're going to garner a higher price because they just won this. I would assume they're going to garner a higher price because they won the Super Bowl. But Next year, who knows, right? Or once again, they trade these players away every couple of years, right? Not in all situations, but a lot.
And the other thing they have now, and we don't have to go down this hole, but now these teams they have their own gambling platforms. They're investing in gambling. Now your kids, they're like one of the top demographics for this gambling stuff.
Calcium, Polymarket.
They're on the apps and all that stuff, and they're doing so. Yeah, they're watching on YouTube and they're betting and they're getting in this, and there's a big rise on that stuff. But when I first saw that, like the teams actually own it, I go, how do they?
Conflict of interest.
Yeah, I'm like, oh my, like I'm not a sports guy. I'm like your kids. Don't ever watch it. I can claim I've never seen a Super Bowl yet. Okay, in my 60 years on the planet, but. I'm a boxer. I want to do stuff. I do this. I've done things, but when I look at it, I'm like, man, now they can actually bet. Like, when is that going to go south?
Okay. Great question. I mean, look at what's happening on Poly. Look what's happening at the UFC. They've had a couple fights where they've had to put up or cancel the fights because something was awry. Something in those betting markets was just off on how people, sudden bets would come in or the size of sudden bets. Yep. So we've already seen, and they're, I think don't quote me on this, but I think they're with Polymarket. And so, yeah, prop bets, especially, right? It's harder when it's the team and all that stuff. But these prop bets, is someone going to play an entire game? Is someone going to go out injured? All those types of things are easy to manipulate. Yeah. And when the team owns that, then I think there's an inherent conflict of interest to that, for sure.
Yeah, it's just fascinating to watch.
Yeah.
I'm just like, it's just like everything we've been talking about. You would 10 years ago, you would have never thought that would ever happen.
No.
Okay, ever. Like, there's no way that's ever going to happen. Are they going to put Pete Rose back in the Hall of Fame?
Right.
Okay, because they're literally like the same guys that come out. Like, you're actually like in charge of it now. Like, it's the irony is too much.
It's like when they legalized marijuana and all those guys were in jail for marijuana possession.
Right.
Yeah,
open the doors.
Just open the doors. But
my favorite thing on that was always, well, what do people do when they're broke and have no options? Well, they sell drugs,
right.
Like Illinois and all these other states. States, now they're going to sell it and do it. I mean, you can never predict that stuff.
No, and that's what I'm saying is that you have to be so nimble through people. I always say this to people that, listen, when I say, hey, I'll see you next Tuesday, that's an assumption, right? We don't know what's going to happen. We don't. A million things can happen between now and next Tuesday for me to either have to cancel, something happens to me, whatever that is. So what's fascinating is that we think that there's this linear, we work in such a linear world, right? Everything's just going to be the way it was yesterday. And the reality is that the world is like this every single day. Yeah. But we just don't see it. It's like the earth spinning on us, but we don't really feel it. So therefore it doesn't exist.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I have my best friend of 30 some years. He's got a thing that was a variable that became a consistent. Okay. A constant. And that's, you got something going on and you say, hey, T-Bone, why don't you come by? He goes, yeah, I'll try to pop by. 100% he'll never show up.
Right.
Okay. That's a word. It's a phrase I learned every time. I'll try to pop by. That is he's never coming.
That's right.
He's never disappointed.
Okay. Got it.
I go that. Oh, just okay. I just don't even argue with him. I just, okay, he's not going to be there. I won't get pizza for him. That was pretty funny, but yeah. Oh man, this is awesome, Richard. This has been a lot of fun.
I enjoyed it a lot.
Cool. Just an interesting kind of going down into this arena to kind of understand it, because this is, to the outsider, it's pretty complicated. It seems like it's this money thing all it is numbers, is data. Okay. It's $1,000, $1 million, $1 trillion. Like we just were tossing all these numbers around like it's no big deal, but it matters. I've always taught my kids, I go, okay, $1 trillion. So take dollar bills and lay them end to end. They can go to the sun and back and you'll have a whole lot left over. Okay. $1 trillion. And we're 37 trillion in debt as a country. And this guy is looking at 3 trillion and they make $1 trillion a year now. And they're like, it's wild.
Yeah.
Okay. Just the quantities and trying to wrap your head around it. There was a judge decades ago, I think from Chicago, when they were talking about, I think when they talked about like $1 billion or something, when that was like actually,
Money.
like, now you're talking real money.
Right.
Like it took $1 billion.
We went to the millions.
Was a lot.
$1 million was a lot, right? I mean, if you made $1 million a year, if you made that was a tremendous amount of money, right? And it's, by the way, it still is a lot of money. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to downplay that, but there's so many people that I've met that make that kind of money, right?
It's. I always tell my kids, go back in the day, you made $100,000. You were like upper middle class,
right?
Like you're driving a Mercedes, you got this, you got like $100,000. You're like lower middle class, like you're barely trying to survive, and don't have 6 kids. Okay,
don't have 6 kids.
Like, oh my gosh, it's like that's all the motivation you need to go make more money every day. But like it's crazy to think about. I call it the advantage of age, right? We've been around. You and I just talked through different bubbles,
right?
Internet bubbles, housing bubbles, all that stuff. So we've been through all that stuff, and I've been through it in my businesses. Losing everything, surviving, doing whatever, starting over, and it's all good. But we're still in the game. The world is still turning, right? There's still money. There's money to be made in every situation,
right?
It just. Are you looking at things? You understand where things are going? Are you positioning yourself properly? Like you said, are you prepared for the 2 times out of 10 that you're going to lose?
Right.
What does the loss look like? That's what you have to
understand that number, by the way. You have to understand that downside. That downside is so important, and the side that most people don't want to look at because it's negative, right?
Right.
So it's funny. I go to my, when I meet with my clients, I'm like, before I get there, you might want to have a drink, right? Because I'm never that much fun to hang out with, to be honest. But it really is like, I go in there and I'm like, okay, here's all the stuff that could happen, and here's the good part, but let's spend more time on this part. And they're like, you depress me when we sit down like this. So
clarity is where you win.
100%. That's what they hire me.
Yeah. That's what I give the companies, right? I just give them clarity.
Right.
A pre-buy, say they're coming in for an acquisition or something. I go in for the pre-buy. I can measure what no one's ever been able to measure now. What's going on the floor.
Right.
I said that's where all the profit leaks, and I can show them. Is this where you at before you buy? So then you can use it. Then I can fix it.
Right.
After they buy. So I can do that too. So that's the unique position you can create.
Sure.
Really understanding the downside, but you have to be able to measure it.
And listen, you're going to give your advice on what they're going to do, and now it's up to them to implement that advice or not, right? And a lot of the times, I give advice to people, in music and with some athletes. You give them advice about their spending habits or how they do things, or what to do with their different revenue sources, and I can give them advice all day long. And it's not just them; it's family offices are the same way, and they have so many different people and so many different advisors, and I'm just one of the voices. So I give my opinion, I tell them why I think this way, and then it's up to them to either implement or not. And then, there's only a certain amount that you or I can do to give our opinions, and then they're going to follow it or not, in my opinion.
So on that, we'll kind of wrap up with this because we bring up a good point here, but where does, in your position, the level of, there's always a level of trust, obviously, right? You're advisory and everything else, but when does that become, and you may or may not know this, but the deciding factor when they're going to go, well, I'm going to go with Richard. I'm going to go with, he said, man, because I trust him. He's been good to me and stuff like that. Is that rare, or it may be why they decide, but they don't tell you? Like, how does that fit?
It's a great question. I don't think I have an answer for that, Richard. I think, listen, the way I look at my position is that I'm only here because they do trust me. Now, they can hire me as their financial advisor and not bring me in all their other situations, right? The fact that they bring me in, or not all, but most clients bring me in on other parts of some very intimately, some ancillary, whatever it may be. But the fact that they want my voice on something tells me a lot about my relationship with them. Right. So if they didn't, they wouldn't even ask me my opinion. Right. If they didn't trust that part of it. So they know, at least my clients know, that I'm going to give them my opinion, whether they like it or not, whether they agree with it or not. Going back to the political thing for a second, if you're right or left, I don't care. I have my opinion. You have your opinion. We can be good together. It's all good, right? So my clients know where I lie with everything, right? So my point to you is that for me, I give them my unbiased opinion. And as I said, a lot of times they disagree with me. So at the end of the day, you're hiring me, you're coming back to me and asking me my opinion again because you appreciate that you feel that I gave you an honest opinion. If they felt that I had something that I was going to gain from it, or there was some reason behind, some conflict of interest or whatever it may be, that would be a different story, right? These people are very, very smart, and people intuitively are smart. So I think that the fact that they keep coming back, they keep asking my opinion is the answer to your question.
Yeah, that's awesome. My kids always tell their friends, when I ask, "Oh, you're going to ask my dad something?" Well, you're only going to get the straight thing,
right?
Okay, he's just going to tell it to you. It is.
It just is.
Yeah, I don't have time for the other stuff.
Well, and a lot of the clients, they have other people, right? They have other advisors, right? And I know they're going to them too because I talk to the other advisors, so I know that they're vetting what I said, and as they should, by the way,
they should, yep.
100%. So yeah,
there's a wisdom and a multitude of counselors, man. You got to go to more than one person, which is, I always hope in my first 20 years in business, Richard, I didn't take help from anybody, and I had like billionaire clients who own professional sports teams and everything else. Tell me, you should try the, whatever, what do you know?
Right.
So it's just, I mean, and everything they suggested was right.
Okay. You know what's always interesting to me is that someone with wild success, financial success, I want to make sure I temper that. So financial success, that they would even ask my opinion, especially when I was much younger. Now it's a little bit different because I'm been in the business a long, long time. But when I was younger in my 20s, and these guys that have built large estates doing what they do, asking me about a real estate purchase or can you run the numbers on, that fascinated me because I'm like, who am I to be advising this guy, right? So there was a little bit of imposter syndrome there where you're like, but they wanted another voice and they trusted that voice enough to go, I'm going to give this a little bit of brain power to see if it makes sense. I know they know that they know better than I do, but in what they did, but they still wanted that just that other perspective.
Yeah, and what I call that, I have the same thing when you're working with businesses and everything else. It's outside eyes.
Yeah, for sure.
Emotional attachment.
Yeah, that's a great thing.
Yeah, if I've made 50 million, 100 million, I got to say, I've got an emotional attachment to that effort.
Right.
Okay, so I may not be making the wisest judgments. I tell people when I end up losing everything in 2009, okay, I was doing it because my identity was what I did.
Right.
Like I made the dumbest decisions.
Right.
Okay, to save this thing, and they just made me go off the cliff faster.
Yeah.
Right, but I needed someone to. And well, I'm not saying they didn't. I had something to do, but I just refused to listen. You know what I mean? But those outside eyes, I can come in and see all the problems in a heartbeat.
Right.
Because I'm not attached.
Right.
But the guys who are in it are too in it.
No, it's a great point.
That's guys like you and I, and whatever. They need that. We bring something. It's not this. I'm not like super gifted.
Right.
I just have an ability to see because I'm not you.
And we have a lot of experience, right? To be honest. I mean, we've seen a lot over the years, just naturally.
Yeah, there's patterns.
Yeah.
That's why I wrote my first book. It's all in the patterns I kept seeing in every business I went into. Oh, you're all doing the same wrong things. This is easy.
Right.
Okay. So, or as I say now, you do all the right wrong things.
Right.
I can help you. Okay. So but that's just the nature of the business. But another big takeaway here is you do need to get the outside counsel.
Yes.
You need to get people who are not attached like you are, but bring in that wisdom, bring in I'll call them the experts or the authorities, and let them help guide you. Use your gut. Does it make sense? And everything else. If it's wonky in any sense, like you just leave and get someone else, right? But if you get that connection, like, we're doing here, like, hey, this is this, these people trust you. They're bringing you into other areas of their life, things like that. That's a confirmation, right?
Yeah.
That you're worth something. So that's really awesome.
No, I agree 1,000%.
So that being said, how do people follow you? How do we get in touch with you? What do we got to do here?
Yeah, so I'm on, I have a website, SRM, Sam Robert Mary, privatewealth.com, and I'm on LinkedIn at Richard McWhorter or SRM Private Wealth. So
Awesome.
either way.
Awesome. Check it out. Check it out. Well, Richard, fantastic.
Thank you for the time today, Richard.
I love going in these things, not knowing what's going to happen.
Let's go down the rabbit hole. That's what I try to
do. I think we hit a few. We did okay. It was awesome. So definitely worth listening to. So thank you for all the time today. Really appreciate you just giving that to the listeners and me. And for everybody else, we'll see you on the next STS podcast. Thanks for joining me on the Sharpen the Spear podcast. If you're a manufacturing executive and you're serious about unlocking hidden profit, improving frontline leadership, and taking control of your floor, go to grit2lead.com right now. Run the free Sharpened Impact Simulator and discover your biggest opportunities are hiding. Don't leave millions on the table. Sharpen your spear, lead from the front, and win the floor. Until next time, stay sharp.